Our mind tells us that change takes some period of time, that there's an unfolding that happens, and that change sometimes it takes a while. And it turns out that transformation begins in an instant. And just as an illustration of the ways that we think about this, we've been having a bunch of difficulties at the house here with our internet connection. And it's not inside the house, it's outside the house. And it's one of those things where it was working just fine a minute ago, or it was working just fine last week, or I didn't change anything and now suddenly it's different. Well, yeah. That's the way that newness happens. Transformation begins in an instant. And there's so many examples that I can give you of times that this happens and where you just naturally assume, oh yeah, well that's a great explanation of that. If you've ever made popcorn, you start out with the popcorn kernels and you start heating them, and they are just sitting there being popcorn kernels for a while, and then suddenly they're popcorn. And the transformation, once it starts happening, just happens. If you've ever spent any time with adolescent boys, they go along with a squeaky voice, and then suddenly their voice starts to change. And it happens in an instant. And then they never go back. They never go back to the squeaky voice again. Their voice changes. And it's one of those things that happens. And there are so many things in your life that are that way. There are so many things in your experience that are that way. We're talking about newness and newness now, because the transformation can happen instantaneously. The change is always unfolding. And sometimes it's change that we're anticipating, and sometimes the things that don't seem like they're new at all. Joe pointed out that today is a new moon. And I have reason to believe that it's not actually new. It's been there for quite some time. However, that's not what we're talking about. There is a cycle and an unfolding. And what happened is the moon and the earth and the sun got into relative positions where what we're seeing now is the newness. And it comes out being different in experience based on where we are in that process. The newness is at hand right now. I got into a conversation with my nephew, and he is interested in fulfillment. He's gotten himself involved in a spiritual practice that's about fulfillment. And fulfillment is one of those wonderful terms where, when we're talking about what it means for us personally, then fulfillment is a very individual thing. And if we get ourselves into a group where somebody else has a standard of what fulfillment is, it's about having a family, it's about having a relationship, it's about being successful in business, it's about doing or having or being or expressing, and having that life experience in a particular lane or alignment or unfolding that other people are saying is wonderful, then that's not personal fulfillment at all. That's getting a merit badge in somebody else's system. And there's nothing wrong with merit badges. You know, if what you want to do is be certified and learn how to save somebody's life using cardiopulmonary resuscitation, then along the way there's going to be a CPR test, and you get to go and demonstrate again that you have those skills and abilities. And having that merit badge, knowing how to do that, knowing what the process is, and as in Joe's case, even knowing what's wrong with the test the way that they're giving it now. We had a conversation about that some time ago. She says, yeah, if I had to do to a person what I did to that to the dummy during the test, I would have broken their neck and killed them. So, and it's about understanding what it is that we are doing as we're earning that merit badge and being the best us that we're going to be. And so what I'm going to say is that fulfillment, personal fulfillment, is about understanding and identifying the unique gifts that we have. What are the skills and talents, abilities, perspectives, desires, preferences that I have that are innate to me, that are unique to me? And how do I use those in such a way that I am going to bring out some newness, some success, some fulfillment in my experience? Newness is always happening. Newness is underway at this very moment. It is happening now. And it is a very simple process that we can turn into a spiritual practice by setting an intention, by being aware that that newness is possible. There's a creative power that's creating something new right now. By opening that invitation and then getting out of the way. See, if you do things the way that you've done things, then you're going to get things the way that you got things. Nothing changes if nothing changes. I once asked a group, about what's the next new thing that they want to have in their life, and a friend of mine says, "I'm really happy with my life the way it's going now." He's kind of a stumper, and it brought to my mind breathing. I've been breathing just fine, and I have every expectation that it's going to continue going just fine. But I want my next breath to be deep and full and everything that is required of it. So go ahead and take a deep breath in. Let yourself be filled. And you can acknowledge in your mind that breath was going to happen anyway, whether you're paying attention to it or not. And as good as it is, let it go. Deep, full breath out. Release. Set the intention to have another deep, full breath. Then take it in. When you get to the top, hold that breath as long as you can until your body says it's time to let go. And whenever that is, let it go. Get out of the way. Don't insist on that breath being all there is. Be in the process of having that newness now. Be in the process of setting an intention, opening yourself up to a new possibility, and getting out of the way. Once you continue breathing at your own pace, you can periodically remind yourself, "Oh, I've been breathing." You don't have to pay attention to it all the time. It's something that you can be aware of or not. But when you are aware of it, let that be a reminder of the newness that you're inviting into your life. And when you're breathing out, of the attachment to the things being the way that they have been, letting go. So we have been having some difficulties in our house with the internet, and I squarely blame it on my internet service provider. And they are making me deal with their automated chat assistants and their robot that has no idea what's going on. Their customer service team spread out all over the globe, apparently in places where it's less expensive to hire people than it is right here in the good old USA. And I understand that they've got their thing. They've got their system, they've got their process. And I also understand the huge frustration that I have as they're suggesting for the 18th time that maybe the problem is because I didn't rent a router from them. And the problem is that I bought my own. And maybe that's where the problem is. It's like, no, we had a technician out here 3 weeks ago. We pretty much identified this up on the pole in the neighborhood someplace, and you guys haven't fixed that yet. And it's very frustrating to have to go through that same process over and over and over again. And on Friday, I think I just got so frustrated that I went over to the gym and I brought my computer with me because they have Wi-Fi there, and I sat in the little table in the lobby and I did a bunch of my work from there. And thinking about how dependent I am on access to the internet. And this was even before we all went home for the pandemic and had to figure out how to do things remotely. We all have such a dependence on being connected instantaneously. Who thinks about how long it would take to write a letter and send it to somebody and then hear back from them as a means of communication? We don't do that anymore. We are used to being able to go on the web and click on a thing and have it show up at our house the next day, or to solve a problem or get a piece of information, etc., etc. But the internet is not really that old. The World Wide Web was actually born about 30 years ago. In the early 1990s is when Tim Berners-Lee came up with the idea of the web and made the first browser. Before that, there was no web. Before that, there was an internet, but it wasn't what it is today. At this point, the internet touches every place on Earth pretty much. Even with Starlink, places that don't have a wire going directly to them are part of the internet. It is a mesh that touches everything. This was not always the case. In the 1960s, there was this idea of setting up a network and configuring it so that you can communicate and share information and resources around the world. Here's a picture of the first internet that was built. That was it in 1969. There were 4 nodes, 3 in California, 1 in Utah. If you were at the Stanford Research Institute and you needed to communicate with somebody who was involved in the same program at UCLA, you could do that. If you wanted to go on Amazon, hadn't been invented yet, wasn't going to be for quite a while. If you wanted to look something up on Google, hadn't been invented yet, wasn't going to be for quite a while. There was newness that was possible then. There was an idea of somebody saying, let's do something, let's start this way and allow it to grow and become something bigger. And we get to invite newness by being willing to be the change that we want to see coming about in the world. There's newness now, and it's happening for us and through us and in us, and it happens all the time. Now, you don't have to go out and invent the internet. You don't have to go out and be the first person who does a financial transaction on the internet, which, by the way, it was recorded, and it was somebody in Philadelphia buying a record from somebody else. They paid for it with a credit card over the internet. But by being aware of the circumstance and the situation that we're having in our life now, and being aware of the experience that we would prefer to have, we can invite that change. Then we can do whatever's our part to do. We can let go of everything that's not ours to do. That's where the getting out of the way is. And maybe there's something that is mine. Maybe in order for this change to come about, there is something that I get to be as that change is happening. And the newness comes in our experience in so many different ways. I was speaking a little earlier about having a spiritual practice, a prayer practice of intentionality, of being able to set an intention and create something new in our lives. And once we learn to do it, once we gain some mastery at the technique, then there's the possibility of praying continuously, to put ourselves into that tone and texture and flavor of being aware of our connection with that infinite creative power. And then the newness tends to show up in our lives in surprising ways that we didn't necessarily do a specific prayer about. And I'll tell a story about something that happened. So I had noticed over the course of the last few weeks that I haven't talked to Annie in a long time. And she'd been a member of the board. She'd been around New Thought Philadelphia, and she went off in a different direction for a while, doing some stuff. So I was noticing that I hadn't heard from Annie in a while. And Tuesday, Dina and I took a road trip. We went up to Jim Thorpe to ride the Gorge train. And as we're driving up the Northeast Extension, we drove past where Annie's house is. And I remarked to Dina that I hadn't heard from Annie in quite some time. And before we got to the parking lot at Jim Thorpe, I got a text message from Annie saying, "Do you have some time to talk today?" And, we managed to reconnect and have that change happen. Now, was my life completely transformed because I heard from Annie? No, but that's the richness and the tone and the texture and the flavor. It doesn't all need to be huge. It can be about observing that the moon is a tiny little sliver, that it's a new moon. And to understand that there's a full moon on the way. And when we see the full moon, to understand that there's going to be a waning moon, and then there's going to be another new moon, and the process continues. And the newness is happening, and the newness is always now. So the transformation starts instantaneously. And for the boy who is looking at all of his friends that are, have had a growth spurt, they're the shortest one in the room, to understand that transformation can happen, and that voice change can happen, and that the newness is available, and it's available instantaneously. And once it happens, the change happens. Have you ever thought about unpopping popcorn? It doesn't work that way. Once the newness happens, there's something new in the world. Once we have seen that something is possible, even more of it becomes possible. Once we had 4 nodes connected on the internet, along with an intention, and quite honestly, some money, there was some additional possibilities that were possible. So the invitation for you is, what newness are you inviting? What is it that you would like to have in your experience next? What is that newness that you want to have, that you're ready for now? Figure out if there's something in the way of that, and let yourself get out of the way. Set the invitation, get out of the way, and invite in the newness. And report back, because I'm looking forward to hearing the stories of that blossoming. So you deserve it. We all deserve it. So it is.